Like other territories, like the archipelago of Chagos in the Indian, the Falklands were and are victims of occupation and colonist usurpation. United Nations stripped them from Argentina in 1833 with a military invasion. Almost 2 centuries of occupation in the largest islands of Latin America. The war of 1982 costed almost 642 lives of Argentinians, and it was the hardest point for this country, which left many despair amongst the Argentinian soldiers. The Argentinian claims, which since 1994 are in their constitution, have been constantly going on in the midst of this British occupation and have varied in form and intensity. While the British impose themselves on the island and allege a supposedly indisputable right on the islands. Let's analyze what is currently called defalconization and the presence of colonialism as a geopolitical strategy. Today we're going to talk about Falkland Islands today, from the requirement of sovereignty to business with the occupant. Let's see news, our guests, and the analysis of our topics. Let's start. Every April 2nd, Argentina commemorates Veterans Days and the fallen in the Falkland War. This year was the anniversary number 37 of the confrontation. Over a decade ago, Cristina Fernandez began the organization of veterans, a project to identify remains of many non-identified bodies. Several families gave their approval for DNA studies. After delays on behalf of the British government, finally, in 2016, they started these tasks and also received criticism from some sectors. With the assumption of Mauricio Macri, it is said that the defalconization process began of their submissive attitude in comparison with the previous Kirchner governments. For example, in 2016, the Vice Chancellor of Great Britain and Argentina signed the Foraldori-Duncan Agreement, which eliminates restriction on oil exploitation and fishing. This favors occupation and, above all, the British profitability. Nowadays, this is what both parties say. The United Kingdom and Argentina grow thanks to our ability to make free trade agreements that are part of our joint prospect. We are both involved in this. We both want to be more open than ever. Before the Brexit, this gives us the opportunity. Our opinions on the topic of sovereignty are well known, and they will known by all of those who see this. But that does not exclude, and we should not exclude, everything that we are doing together to build a partnership. Great Britain has been involved in numerous armed conflicts throughout history, some of them on a tragic scale for the world's history. They know that going to war is not the best scenario. And as we normally do, let's see our map and let's see what the Falkland Islands have. We will carry out a geopolitical analysis due to its strategic importance and the disputes in which they are immersed. Archipelago is more than 200 islands located on the continental platform of Southern America, within the South Atlantic Ocean, which is part of the Argentinian Sea. This conglomerate of islands in the southeast of Argentina has a total surface of less than 12,000 square kilometers and houses a population of almost 3,500 inhabitants. This makes it the most populated island of Argentinian port, with 2,121 people. The land is rocky with mountain plateaus, and characteristic geographic elements are the salt river of stones, old riverbeds, which are from time to time transformed in small glaciers, as well as other islands of the region. It is abundant in fauna. The surrounding waters are very rich in edible fish and seafood. The economy is based on fishing and livestock, especially on cattle. In 1993, it was announced that there was miles of area around the islands. The first research suggested the possibility of substantial oil reserves capable of producing 500,000 barrels of petroleum per day. Additionally, there have been oil basins discovered to the south and the north of the archipelago. This explains its geographical and geopolitical relevance, which is not only because of the petroleum, but also because of the minerals and polymetals in the area. In addition, it is one of the world's largest sweetwater reserves, and that it is because the Antarctic contains almost 80% of the planetary reserves of sweetwater, which gives it strategic preponderance for humanity. It is also an interoceanic passage between the Atlantic and the Pacific, which makes it a potential substitute of the Panama Canal. The control of the islands allows the possible exploitation of the resources in the Antarctic area, as well as those from the continental platform, which is 200 to 300 maritime miles. In the case of the United Kingdom, it gives them the possibility of the other coasts in the Atlantic. Who discovered this island? It's still a source of discussion. Some think that it was from the original Yamanas, other from a Chinese navigator, possibly a deserter from the Magellan expedition, or America Vespuccio. What is not an object of discussion is that in 1833, the United Kingdom stripped them from the Argentinian government and administers them illegally as a British overseas territory. Whenever we investigate occupied and besieged territories, the common denominator is resources and geographic location, which allows control over the rest of the countries. Let's see, Argentinian newspaper, Página 12, on April 2nd, 2019 says, Falkland Islands, A Gust of Wind by Edgardo Esteban. He's a journalist, professor at the Faculty of Journalism and Social Communication of the Plata University. And he was a former soldier in the Falkland War. What he says is, the struggle for sovereignty is continuous, and this strengthens us to go forward with the Falkland issue, despite the fact that the government of Mauricio Macri doesn't contribute to this effect. The agreement secretly signed on September 13, 2016 between Susana Malcora, former Argentinian foreign minister, and Alan Duncan, British vice chancellor, only sought to satisfy orders that came from the UK on resource exploitation, fishing, hydrocarbons, or air flights, without any benefit to the Argentinian people. And he asks, why not insist again and again on the just claim of sovereignty that our country has since 1833, and that is subjugated by colonial possession of Great Britain? So we're going to add this question to the ones that set the stage. We're going to talk with Edgardo Esteban, who besides being one of our journalists, is also a professor in several universities and served in the military during the 1992 Falkland War. Okay, so he has first-hand information because he was there. Greetings from Critical Moves, Edgardo. The Falkland is a strategic point, not only because of the sovereign claim. The Argentinian Republic lost the Falkland Islands when they were stripped from the United Kingdom in 1833. Their geopolitical situation is pivotal for the international powers. On Falkland Island lies a military base, which is one of the most important NATO has in the southern hemisphere, and controls the southern Atlantic. From that perspective, we are talking about 5 square kilometers, which means that not only military, but also a food resource and it controls one of the largest reserves on the planet. On gas resources, just a few days ago, there was a licitation where British companies are now allied to the inhabitants of the island. But also, this is a natural passage that connects both oceans. It is the only natural passage. So this also gives great control in radars and technology on the base. But fundamentally, what it means looking forward to the future in the year 2041, the Antarctic Pact will be discussed, and from that perspective, the United Kingdom is already pointed to the food reserves, to the harbor and hybrid reserves, but fundamentally to the water, sweet water. Elsa Busone, one of the most important specialists in the Argentinian Republic, anticipates that can be the possibility of search more sweet water. And this could start the next World War. We repeat, 5 square kilometers. They also have the control of the citizens and practically 80% of the continent that are intensely working to keep all of the control in the southern part of the sea. But if we're talking not only territorial sovereignty, not economically, cultural, educational, integration, national integration, but also what the claim means. But when we're talking about economical aspects, from 1983, $150 million have been recollected just from the fishing rates. And this is an increasing number. Because now the inhabitants of the Falkland Islands is the second place in the world with the greatest income per capita, $122,000 per year. This is just to see the dimension of what the economic level and strategic level and the situation that is implementing the United Kingdom in relation to the maritime territory control. And also the struggle that the Argentinian government has for its sovereignty. Thank you for having us with you. Let's ask our guests. What explains the defalconization and that Argentina is on the side of its opponents? The model, the need to get money. Is sovereignty subordinated or omitted by business and the eagerness to hand over power to a big capital? There are many vultures and vulture funds and companies interested in bidding in those cold southern waters for the richness and the resources. Let's go to our first pause, and we'll be right back. Falkland Islands today, from the requirement of sovereignty to the business with the occupant. How is the occupation? Let's go to certain historical details of the conflict of the sovereignty of these southern archipelagos, considered by United Nations in litigation between Argentina and the United Kingdom, that is, a pending decolonization. On January 3, 1833, the British warship HMS Clio appears in front of the islands at the command of Captain John James Onslow, and he evicts the Argentine government and captain of the Goleta Sarandi, Jose Maria Pineda. Few days after, the English leave, but a colonial population was installed. James Onslow said to Pineda that he arrived to reaffirm the British sovereignty and that will return possession of the islands in the name of King William IV. Another key moment occurred on December 16 of 1965. United Nations approved the historical resolution 2064, by which it established that the islands and the surrounding sea spaces represented a case of colonialism that should be resolved in negotiation. In January 1966, the first negotiation rounds take place. The conversation advanced, and in 1968, a memorandum of understanding was redacted. Argentina signed it, but until last minute, the United Kingdom pulled out due to the rejection that it generated in the opposition of its country. The negotiation reached a stop. During the last military dictatorship, on April 2, 1982, Argentinian troops disembarked on the island to recover them, and the conflict was ignited. The war ended on June 14th of the same year, when the Lieutenant Luciano Benjamin Menendez signed the surrender. Therefore, Great Britain restores its administration on the Falklands. In that war, the loss of Argentinian soldiers were 3 or 4 times greater than the ones of the Britons. They lost a total of 649 soldiers. They not only had to fight the enemy, but the incompetence and cruelty of their own military leaders. So refers Edgardo Esteban in the article of 2011. 2 years later, Argentina in the United Nations closes the debate on sovereignty and adds an argument that still stands today: the self-determination of the inhabitants of the islands. April 6, Héctor Timerman gives the General Director a note signed by the presidents of UNASUR, by which they request to start new negotiations. UNASUR systematically has urged Great Britain to restore positions. With the government of Macri, they criticized the Kirchner position. Well, I would like to add Federico Montero from La Plata. He's a professor in several universities. Federico, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. Falkland Islands today, from the is there steps back with the President Macri in we haven't seen any mention of this historical request of Argentina, and on the contrary, they say that there was too much confrontation in the previous governments. If this is so, what does it have? Why do we think this is happening? Well, good afternoon. I would like to affirm that there has been a reverse in the Argentinian politics in referral to the Falkland Islands. This is not only an issue that has to do with politics, but there is a constitutional mandate in the defense of sovereignty, and this is included in the Constitution of '94. So this is not only a matter of politics, but overall a matter of state interest. So let's see what happens in Argentina, and let's see what happens in the region too. Before the Panama Canal, it was the maritime route. It was an important reservoir. And we would like to know if are the Falklands a sentiment, a symbol? Is it a part of the region that bets for sovereignty and says no to imperialism and sacking of resources? What does it mean that the region is still in hands of the United Nations? Well, the Falkland cause has always been accompanied by the struggle of the Latin American countries. This is part of our identity, but it's also it's been a part of the politics of the governments in Latin America. We see how UNASUR has a very strong position, and it has requested the British government to retake the conversations. And it also has presented on the United Nations floor the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands that must be resolved, and asking the United Kingdom to come back to dialogue. However, with the Macri government, this has all been disarticulated. There is no longer a legitimate request on behalf of the Argentinian request. This has been obvious in all of the international summits. It used to be a central axis of all discussions, but it no longer is. And on the contrary, Macri has signed a Foridori-Duncan agreement by which it is recognized that Argentina will remove any obstacles that will stop the advance of Falkland Islands. And this way, we disarticulate any of the struggle that had been taken up before. And on the other hand, they recognize the self-determination of the inhabitants. But this is obviously dismantled by the United Nations article saying that it belongs to Argentina. Stella Caloni, let's talk to her from Buenos Aires. She's very well known in our continent. Thank you for being with us, Estela. We have said that there is a defalklandization within Argentina and a disarticulation on a continental level with all of the supports that Argentina used to have from the Latin American countries. What do you think is happening? Well, this is explained by the changes that happened in the continent, because it used to be a strict support of this dispute, obviously on the side of Argentina. Argentina has not stopped to fight since 1833. There are some resolutions of United Nations that are not being fulfilled. And after the previous government did a whole process so the entire world could see that the Falkland Islands belong to Argentina, how could we think that this new government and there was this government that's aligned with the U.S. interests that would not support the legitimate request that Argentina had stated. And now Great Britain has established a military base by which nuclear submarines have passed by. And NATO has a presence there, although they have no right to be there. And this because this is the South Atlantic, not the North Atlantic. You may recall that in the year 2017, where there's a disappearance of Ara San Juan submarine. It disappeared in the middle of some maneuvers that Great Britain, Chile, United States, and Brazil were carrying out. And we were just informed. And Argentina didn't even participate. This has a key importance because the presidency of Macri has erased all of this historical struggle. We even had an excellent ambassador, Alicia Castro, and that she even attained the support of some British unions. So people could be aware that how close they are to the Argentinian land territory and how far away they are from Great Britain. But now, the Ministry of Energy the minister who sent some ships to see where the submarine had sunk. And there are some data, but of course this is not revealed to the public. What we think is that they were victims of some war maneuvers in the South Atlantic. It was declared that during the search of the submarine, all of the riches that are there were discovered. And these riches, far from being exploited by the Argentinian, are given to the hands of Great Britain. Many people are calling out on this. The people who fought in the Falkland Islands, Alicia Castro, the former ambassador. But here they don't hear anything. In Argentina and mainland, they don't hear a thing. They're not only taking over the Falklands, but everything that's surrounding them, because it's a geopolitical strategy problem. It's a problem of sovereignty that is now important more than ever. Because can you imagine that the Minister of Defense declared that last year there was a military base was established in Tierra del Fuego, and the second base that was established to detect nuclear trials. So they're not only allowing bases on the Falklands, but also in the south of the country. They were declaring this so we could sell all of the food to all of the expeditions to the Antarctic. This means that we're also losing our portion of the Antarctic. So the loss of our sovereignty is brutal. Imagine that there's only one company that is called Benetton, but it's a British stocks, had bought 1 million acres in Argentina, in Falklands. This is a very serious moment for the country, where we have to analyze the concessions that are being made. And they're exploiting all of the fauna of our sea resources. Estela, Could you answer if you think this is going to be an important topic on the 2020 elections? I think it's a topic that is important. That is important in how we've lost sovereignty and a U.S. base that is being installed in Tierra del Fuego, another one in the northern part of the country. So I think that we have to place this topic on to discussion. If there's something that the people agree on, is the sovereignty on the Falkland Islands. And unfortunately, this last government has been the most submissive to foreign interests. And they're signing treaties behind the back of the Congress and the country as a whole. He's even given center stage to the International Monetary Fund. And the IMF gives instructions. And of course, they're interested in having a continuity of Macri because he is their puppet. We were having, before this president, we were having an experience, a sovereign experience with our previous presidents. And so was Brazil before President Temer. Everything that has been gained is now being lost. They're destroying Mercosur, UNASUR, CELAC, all of those organizations that we had, that we have to recover. I think that the topic of sovereignty must be openly discussed during the elections. Because otherwise we're going to be handcuffs. Let's remember that Kissinger, what Kissinger said, he said that we have to keep allies in the region. Thank you very much to our guests. Seeing all of the interests, do you think that this could have some repercussion? This recent statement of the United Nations saying that the UK must leave the Chagos archipelago. Do you think it'll be a legal precedent? Well, every legal precedent has a political value. However, we do have to see the balance of forces. The United Nations has had a position since long years ago, but the United Kingdom does not respect them and does not sit to the table of negotiation. And on top of that, the Macri government has removed all of the importance of this topic. And on the contrary, it's aligning with the geostrategic interest of the U.S. in the region. And now these 3 years, of course, this is the results. And on top of that, Macri signed this agreement which compels Argentina to remove any obstacles for Great Britain to be able to exploit and do everything they want. So now that there's a military and economic and fishery development on the islands, the UN resolutions are harder to comply with every time. I want to say that the Falkland Island situation is a regional topic due to the military presence, because it's a threat against peace, and it's a NATO strategic space. And the presence of all these corporations, international corporations, that are taking advantage of fishery and all of the resources, it affects not only Argentina but the whole region. We hope that this debate is installed in the next 2020 elections. Thank you, Federico. Well, we have this first part of the analysis. We have seen both positions. And his government. This is what explains that it is a question of geostrategy and continental late colonialism. Is this over, or is this at the core of geopolitical strategy? And taking into account what we discussed in part with Stella and Federico, do you think there's a resolution of the conflict in the horizon? For this, we're going to talk with more guests. We'll be right back after this pause. Falkland Island today, from the requirement of sovereignty to business with the occupant. As we said in the first part, with the control of the Falkland Islands, a region that has long been harassed by powerful actors, what is the geostrategic relevance, military bases, Antarctic projection, possibility of maintaining a sovereignty claim on the Antarctic sector, and a passage from both oceans. The Falkland Islands represent a strategic place for the interest of geopoliticals of the great powers. In the islands, we find a military base in Bahía Agradable, one of the most important that NATO has in the southern hemisphere. On February 2016, the Ministry of Defense, Michael Shannon, went to the islands and announced that they would invest $120 million in infrastructure for the defense. It recognized that there were 2,000 effective military people, airplanes and helicopters. Some analysts think that 1982 was just a reason to place the military bases. But it also responds to other geopolitical reasons. So says the plan of the Indian Ocean. It was important to have control over these Indians, and for the U.S. and for NATO, and indicating that the United Kingdom was one of their main allies. This base is one of the most important ones it has, and being able to dominate Mercosur. It has 3 more islands where they have military bases. Well, the archipelago of Chagos, there's a triangle of power. The military presence in the Falkland Islands has constantly violated resolutions 411 of United Nations, where it is declared as an area of peace and cooperation. There we had some information. Let's talk with Bruno Garcini, an investigator. Thank you, Bruno, for being with us. Thank you for the invitation. Bruno, as we were speaking at the beginning, In our territory, there's a military base full of weapons and military equipment. Now they're trying to have total control of the South. Let's talk about what the UK obtains and its ally, the US. What do they obtain with these control? Well, after World War II, NATO, led by the US, they integrated all of the military bases as one. And the military base of the Falklands has a base there to support the military force that had been the main force of projection of the US and then of the UK. So if they controlled the seas and the maritime routes through where merchandise and supplies can be transported. So the UK and the United States, they have the control of these routes. The base on the Falkland Islands has been fundamental. First, to have control over the Southern Sea, and they also get petroleum for their sea forces. As we know, now there's great fishing resources. And Antarctic is right there. And it'll be in a dispute soon. And the UK can reclaim some land there. All of this just to give you an overview. But there's another very important point, which is that the sea control and that the control that the Falkland has. So, as we see that the claim of the Falkland Islands doesn't come only from Argentina, but from other countries. But before they had organizations that kept them together. These have been disarticulated. You see that the networks are disarticulated? Yes, I do. But because I think we're in a phase where the great companies have control. And China has also their interests. So now the companies are just trying to sack all of the resources. And we see these companies like ExxonMobil that wants to extract oil from the south, and once they had already been kicked out of Venezuela. So we see a phase where companies are being sacked, are sacking our resources. And this is also supported by the president of Argentina, Macri, who is very close to the great banks of the world. These are banks that control many companies. If you see the telecommunication, oil, all of these companies, the names of these banks appear. They're stockholders. There's even debts that these banks have against Argentina. Well, Macri just gave up. Before, in the government of Cristina, we were able to have a unanimous position where the Falkland Island ships that had their flag were not allowed to stop in any Latin American port. But now we're allowing them to do everything. And these are companies There are British companies, and now they're allowed to do anything they want. This is the geostrategical. But there's another element that we have to analyze, the human element. We all have friends that went to that war. And that in this government, that this government we didn't even request, we didn't even talk about the topic. We can't forget the cultural repercussions that war had on the people. And one of the main battle flags that we had, just by simple logic, the UK is really far away and Malvinas are just in front of the coasts of Argentina. And now there's a phase of all of the resources being sacked. All of these companies are trying to exploit all of our resources. To answer a question, last week we were reviewing the Chagos Island incident. Do you think this might have set a legal precedent on what may happen with the Falkland Islands?
Si esa es la estrategia medular que está aplicando una potencia como esa.
Directamente sí, lo que pasa es que las potencias.
Well, I think so, because in the Falkland Islands case, what they did is they inserted an artificial inhabitant in the island. They, in the Cristina Kirchner government, they even voted to say if they wanted to be independent or not. And what they did is not allow that there be Argentinian population, and then they made them vote. And if they asked them if they wanted to be British citizen or Argentinian citizen. But this is appalling, is absurd. And this takes us to understand that these differences are normally solved by force. But we could do it. We can do it through other institutions. However, through United Nations, it really doesn't matter all the resolutions that exist because nothing has happened. And by mediation, nothing has been obtained either. Do you think the thing is that Argentina has no power over the Falkland Islands right now? And what we have to understand is the actual moment that Argentina is living, that after this process that we're having, we have to reestablish consensus. And we have to take this back to the diplomatic field. So if we would want to do it as a fight, we would have to recover all our military forces. Otherwise, nobody's going to respect us. Because the truth is that nobody's going to come and just give them back to us. But this is hard with governments like Macri, because they are aligned with the United States, and buying weapons and ships is hard. Of course, the thing is that Macri gives in totally to the UK. But if it was up to Macri, he would even be member of the NATO. He even allowed several military bases to install themselves there. On the south, the Tierra de Fuego, there's a military base.
es establecer una
And in conclusion,
propia por
it's to establish a politics of our own
que la verdad que ni siquiera tienen concepción
without adherence of any foreign country.
el gobierno de Macri tuviese concepción de élite, agarraría y negociaría.
If Macri had any conception of sovereignty, he would discuss, negotiate some benefit for the Argentinian people.
Es decir, con la sobra que le tiran. Ni
But now we're not even left with anything there.
que hay en este momento de América Latina son envasados con plástico en Miami. No tienen
These governments they're just plastified by
así intermediario como si fuesen
plastic of Miami. They're just, they don't care.
de élite tampoco. Esa es una cuestión primordial. Y hay otro punto.
There's another point.
Otra oportunidad que nosotros tenemos
There's another opportunity that we might have
establecer otro punto de negociación con
to establish another negotiation with the UK
la Unión Europea.
is to take advantage that the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union.
Y eso podría abrir
This might open a space where we
en la comunidad internacional y sigamos trabajando
could work towards this end.
en la escena internacional y con más aliados y con más
Maybe we could find more allies, more support for the Malvina struggle.
gobierno de Cristina Fernández de Kirchner se logró la posición, el apoyo de todos los países latinoamericanos.
Before the Cristina Kirchner government, there was support of China and all of the governments of the Latin America.
Pero si nosotros avanzamos también en trabajar políticamente ahí,
But if we advance in working politically there,
Reino Unido, pero
maybe we could
tomárselo con un poco más
find solutions with the United Kingdom.
de madurez porque realmente esta es una región
But
que se está volviendo
this is a region that's becoming
un campo de depredación
no man's land,
donde cualquier potencia
where
agarra
any powerful actor
intentar promover conflictos
lleva lo que venga
internos,
could come and provoke internal conflicts,
divisiones internas a través de nuevos conflictos, guerras posmodernas, obvio. Ahora nosotros no hablamos
new wars, modern wars.
revoluciones de color, relatos de odio, es decir, nosotros estamos avanzando
Now we're
irremediablemente,
advancing
que nosotros primeramente no estamos preparados
in a military field where we don't have any capacity.
en Argentina. Esto es muy presente porque la cuestión de
This is very clear in Argentina
es un tabú. Es un tabú
because there's a taboo.
fundamental porque pasamos un par de dictaduras y pasamos
It's a taboo because we had two dictatorships,
de una manera más
so we can't even talk about it.
oficiales militares que están muy permeados por la guerra contra el comunismo, contra la guerra contra la subversión.
We can't talk about it because even the military
Por Estados Unidos. Pero si nosotros no logramos en América Latina
are not willing to fight this. But
una universidad,
if we're not willing to work together with all of the other Latin American countries, like UNASUR had proposed,
después nos vamos a estar todo el tiempo quejando de
we're just going to be
porque viene un gobierno títere le damos exploraciones de
we're
petróleo.
just going to be complaining for the rest of our lives on how we let them take control of our stuff.
Un futuro de lágrimas.
This is going to be a future of tears or a future of happiness.
Gracias por estar acá y fijar tu postura.
Thank you very much for stating your position.
Pasar a nuestras ideas conclusivas después de haber escuchado a los analistas.
Let's go to our conclusions.
Bueno, allí lo teníamos,
Well,
Malvinas, Atlántico Sur,
Falkland Island
una historia de ocupación que hace parte
is just a geopolitical history.
después de una postura de soberanía innegociable.
After we had a position of sovereignty,
Es la que ha llegado. Ha habido un viraje hacia el
there has been a
desde
shift
2015 hasta el presente y la
from 2015 to now.
por eso se habla de un proceso de desmalvinización.
And now that's why we're talking about a process of defalkanization.
Con Reino Unido son dos cosas evidentemente excluyentes. Se han desarmado los espacios de integración.
The integration spaces have been disarticulated,
De los consorcios que
and we have several companies who are trying to sack all of the natural resources.
están operando bases enlazadas y alineadas según OTAN.
There are also NATO military forces.
Hay nódulos de minerales valiosos
We
para
must come back
la tecnología del
to the roots.
petróleo,
There's oil, there's resources.
y del momento convulso que está viviendo nuestra región por las amenazas y profundas contradicciones.
And we must go back to the region to see of all the problems we have and how that has repercussions on this unity.
de una alianza, de un frente militar alternativo, pro soberanía, pro libre autodeterminación.
We might have to also think of strengthening our military part.
Y a propósito de lo electoral, es necesario reinstalarlo
It's
en la
important
agenda.
to reinstall this in the agenda. Thank you for being with us. See you tomorrow.